Buenos días, ¿cómo están? ¿Me escuchan bien? Can you hear me in the back? Qué bueno, qué bueno. Hola, buenos días. No se escucha. A ver, con ganas, con ganas. Buenos días. Buenos días. Mándeme. Perfecto, gracias. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. I was telling my husband and some of my colleagues, including one of my best friends, Elise Rodriguez, that yesterday was one of the most special days I've ever experienced. And it is so much because of all of the support that you all have given me and the work that our team has been moving forward and sharing with you all. So gracias, gracias. Mire, les voy a TMI, ¿verdad? Pero anoche cuando llegué al hotel me puse a bañar, ¿verdad? Porque me baño múltiples veces al día. And I was like showering and all of a sudden I lost it. I lost it for so many reasons. Just because I think of my abuelita and I think of my mamá and my papá, and I'm just like, they did this. Like they really were the initial guerreros and guerreras. And without even realizing it, and with the limited formal education, with just a 5th grade and a 6th grade education, they really, really pushed the dual language movement forward without realizing that that's what they were doing. Así es que gracias por todo. I have anybody from Tornillo? Tornillo, ¿dónde está Tornillo? ¿Qué ole, Tornillo? So after they closed the factories, after they closed La Levi's y La Fara in El Paso, Texas, my parents didn't have a job, and so my dad became a part-time custodian for Socorro ISD. Por acá está Socorro ISD. And it's so interesting. A couple of days ago, I got an email from a superintendent in a district in Texas from Tornillo. And she said, Dr. Medina, I've been researching your work. We're very interested in what you're doing. And by the way, I saw one of your articles, and I know your father. And I was like, ¿qué fregados pasó? What did my dad do? A ver si no me puso en vergüenza, because he can do that sometimes, ¿verdad? And she said, your dad is the most kind, wonderful gentleman that I have ever met, and I was so honored to serve alongside him. And it was just so crazy that here's this superintendent reaching out to me, and the first thing that she needed to mention was my father, and that just made me so very happy. And so when I talked to him last night, I told him everything that was happening, and he said, no se te olvide hablar de mí de nuevo. So I've already mentioned Jose Luis multiple times. I think he would be happy. I hear a lot of, maybe it's this. Let me get away from this. Aquí vamos. Is that better? Perfecto. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about real lesson planning for the dual language classroom. Yo dije, I have a soundtrack o algo, ¿verdad? Often, we have been forced to lesson plan through a dual language, monolingual, not a dual language, but a monolingual and monocultural lens. And one of the things that we really need to embrace is the fact that although there is so much that we already know, there are some things that we need to continue to tweak as we lesson plan. And I have to tell you that as a teacher, I often lesson planned on the fly. And that hurts my heart because I was a pretty solid teacher, like a B plus on a good day. I feel like I reach students, but sometimes I would also be driving to school and thinking about what I was going to be teaching that day. And no se hagan como que yo soy el único, because some of you did that right before you came to la cosecha. No se hagan. Mira, que ya, se confesó. And so today, I'm going to share with you the C6 by Literacy Framework. And obviously, this is a 3-day training that we usually facilitate, and I don't have 3 days. But I'm going to give you bits and pieces that I think are going to be important as you continue your reflection about the lesson planning process. You also have to remember that many of us don't have a clear idea of what lesson planning in a grade level team should look like. Many of us actually show up to our planning meetings and we share activities, but sharing activities isn't lesson planning. It is about actually writing content, language, culture objectives. It is about ensuring that we're differentiating instruction and that we're doing some of those things that perhaps we had never heard out loud so that we're truly serving our students. And so I wanted to make sure that you had that as a foundation for our conversation today. Vamos a comenzar con mi información de contacto. I see a lot of my friends from las redes sociales. So thank you for embracing the work that we're doing. Thank you for sharing all of my Monday messages. I don't know if you don't know this, you should, but every Monday I actually do 2-minute PD that you're free to use in your staff meetings, that you're free to use in your grade level meetings. I do little 2-minute PDs for parents en inglés y en español, porque mi mente funciona en los dos. And so sharing all of that information is important because I know that not every district has the funds to actually bring someone like myself or someone on my team to serve your stakeholders. So we're gonna start with a quotation. I'm actually going to start with the one on the right, and I'm going to ask one of my new friends to read it like a guerrera, like a dual language warrior. Necesito una voz así fuerte, una voz así como de superestrella Lucía Méndez, Daniela Romo. Adelante.
Nuestro propósito. Like education, lesson planning is a political act. If we design lessons via a monolingual and monocultural lens, we become the oppressors.
Les echó un bombazo. She's like, keep sharing your little center activities. Keep talking about the things that we need to turn in for administrators rather than actually lesson planning. This is one of the reasons why the framework that we've conceptualized specifically for dual language lesson planning is different. What we do in terms of lesson planning is a political act. And when we don't lesson plan, or when we lesson plan on the fly, we are in fact taking a stand. And that stand is that our children don't deserve the best that we have to offer. En la madriux. For those of you that don't know what en la madriux means, that's Franish, very similar to Spanglish, but it's French and Spanish, Franish. En la madriux. The one on the left-hand side is one of my favorites as well. Are we actually disrupting the space, or are we in fact continuing the cycles of oppression that have existed because we have been forced to look at lesson planning through that monolingual and monocultural lens? I'm gonna give you about un minuto because I'm really strict, ¿verdad? Llegué bien bravo. But I want you to go ahead and talk at your table groups really, really quickly. What are you thinking in terms of lesson planning as a political act? And I want to dictate who is going to practice their speaking first and who is going to practice their listening as well. So the person that has the blondest or lightest colored hair in your group, you are going to be practicing your speaking. I'm going to ask you, mira, 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 we're just like kids. You're like, ah, cálmense. Hijo, pongan atención. The person with the lightest colored hair, you're gonna start by practicing your speaking. I want you to explain, to me, this is what this quotation means. Once that person is done, then the rest of the group can practice their speaking. While that person is practicing their speaking, you're gonna practice your listening like this. Because we know that emergent bilingual students have to know exactly what language domains they're working on in order to fully internalize the content and the language integration that we have placed before them. So, personas con el pelo más rubio, practiquen el hablar, and then everyone can join in. And I'm gonna come and check around to make sure you're working, ¿eh? Rápido. Rápido, sí, ándale. Sí. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking you're saying, now I'm stuck as you're here.
No se apure, me voy a... usted tiene el más rubio, ándele. I'm right behind you, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Y los que siguen, adelante. Un minutito. 1 minute, everybody. que esté con usted.
Ay.
Gracias por regresar.
Me presenté.
Wu, su, san, ar, yi, kanwa, kanwa. For those of you that were with me yesterday or that we've had a chance to learn alongside each other, you know that I always bring groups to attention in multiple languages. For my principals and assistant principals and district leaders in the room, why wouldn't we be modeling inclusion by bringing to attention and bringing to the forefront multiple languages? Additionally, why wouldn't in our faculty meetings actually indicate to teachers which of the 4+1 language domains they're working on that moment? Because remember that whatever we as principals and assistant principals value, that is what is embedded into the instruction. And so if you're an administrator or somebody that facilitates meetings and you're not modeling these biliteracy instructional strategies, I say, why the hell not? No se hagan. What, you're a building manager now? Just to remind you, my full name is Jose Luis Medina Hernandez Franco Lopez Jr. Diaz Cruz. And this is a visual that I created because on August the 3rd of this year, as you know, my hometown of El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua was attacked by a white supremacist who wanted to kill people that looked like me and my family and that spoke the Spanish language like many of us in this room. And one of the questions that I know that many of our students grapple with is, am I enough? And I know that for me, even today, that continues to be a story that unravels in my mind. So, am I American enough? And I'm kind of done because even though I'm 48 and I look 38, like now I'm done. Like I don't know if I'm American enough, but I definitely know that I'm El Pasoan and Juarense enough, ¿verdad? Para mis Juarenses, ¿verdad? Para mis Juarenses y los del Paso. Testimonio, yesterday we talked about, thank you for those of you that have supported my testimonio books in English and in Spanish, and then Familia and Family yesterday. I wanted to make sure that I thanked you all for that. And to obviously really mention the Velázquez Press organization because they've been such an amazing partnership with me and have allowed me to do, yo soy bien loco, eh? And they just give me free rein to write what I need to write, which is awesome. A reminder that if you've not read the guiding principles for dual language education, that you should. This is a free download. I know that you're not gonna believe this, but there are many people that have been implementing dual language programs for years, and they've never actually looked at the guiding principles for dual language education. Some of us have been teaching in dual language settings and have never read the guiding principles for dual language education. The C6 Biliteracy Framework actually was designed as a lesson planning teacher-friendly tool to actually align with everything that happens in the guiding principles. So the guiding principles is the research and the rubrics. It's not the most teacher-friendly. It gives you the research, but not how and what and how it really looks like in the classroom. But the C6 Biliteracy Framework, that's the intent, so that we can bring this document to life. Yesterday, I reviewed the 3 goals of dual language. I wanted to make sure that I did that with you today. These are the 3 goals. We also realized yesterday that some of us have not taught the 3 goals of dual language to our students. And so I wanted to make sure that I reiterate that again. As soon as you walk into your school, there should be a big bulletin board with the 3 goals of dual language in Inglés y en Español. The front office needs to have it. The front office staff needs to know it. And I wanted to share with you one of the images that I shared yesterday. This is actually student work from a 1st grade class here in Nuevo Mexico. But I didn't show this picture yesterday, and I wanted to bring it to you today. This is a 1st grade student who owns the 3 goals of dual language, who can explain to you the difference between a content, a language, and a cultural objective. In 1st grade, can give you a tour of the school and explain to you las 3 metas de un programa dual, SUP. And some of us actually facilitate and lesson plan for the dual language classroom, and we couldn't do that. but yet a 6-year-old can. So just wanted to bring that up para que se les quede el bombazo en el corazón. And if it hurts right now a little bit, because you know that you haven't done it, I'm gonna go ahead and shut up to give you a telenovela dramatic pause so that it hurts a little bit more, ¿verdad? Así. Que les arda, que les arda. I'm gonna ask you to now practice just your thinking, not your chismeando, not your speaking. I know how to plan lessons that create access to grade level standards regardless of language proficiency. Take a moment to reflect on that on your own. I now want you to think of your classroom. Is there a designated space where if I walked into your class, I could say, oyes, ¿dónde están las metas de aprendizaje del contenido y del idioma y de la cultura? And then the students would be able to identify where in the classroom those objectives would be. What if I asked one of your kids, ¿cuáles son los dos colores del programa? What are the two colors that designate the two languages in your program? Would they be able to answer? Would they know that the content learning target is the what they are learning, aligned to the standards, and that the language objective is the how, via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and metalinguistic connections? Or would they be the kid that I go and I say, where are your learning objectives? And that child would say, yo no sé. Or even worse, I would see a sign that says, 2.45 CB to the 9th power, the students will be able to, and that I would say, what is that for? And they would say, no lo hemos usado, but I think we're gonna start using it tomorrow. Or even worse, when the kids lie for us because they love you, even if we're not that nice, they love us, right? And I say to a kid, where are your objectives? And they're like, we're using them like in the next 10 minutes. And I'm like, no manches, mentiroso. No manches, mentiroso. And so we are going to go ahead and really focus on those. Now, these are the 6 C's. One of the things that I love is that it really embodies all of the research that we've become familiar with. And so the great thing about lesson planning through this political lens, through this wanting to be equitable lens, through this multilingual lens, is that you don't have to get rid of anything that you've ever learned. It is about embracing all of the awesomeness that you already possess and giving it shape through a dual language lens, so that we don't have to think about our lessons as getting kids to transition to English, but rather to support the 3 goals of dual language. You also don't have to memorize them. There are not tons of features that you need to memorize. There's a 1-page cheat sheet that is readily available that will get you started on that thought process about how to lesson plan. As I mentioned, the framework was designed specifically after the release of the 3rd edition of the Guiding Principles. And the cool thing is that it's so inclusive that there are school districts in the United States and internationally that are now using it to lesson plan, even in monolingual settings. Let me say that again. It is being used to lesson plan in monolingual settings because of its additive nature, because it realizes and understands that bilingualism and biliteracy is dynamic, and that things change and shift, and that even if we serve in a monolingual setting, we actually have to give kids an opportunity to leverage everything that they bring into the space. So we're gonna go ahead and focus today on create and connect. We only have a little bit of time, but I want to spend most of our time in create because that really is the foundation. I was very blessed that I guided the work collaboratively with our team at the Center for Applied Linguistics for a couple of years. And so I know a lot of the research in terms of GLAD and PSYOP and two-way PSYOP, and I love those frameworks. And so we've taken all of that work and just taken it to the next level so that we really, really align with everything that we need to be doing. Take a look at create. Create and design authentic learning experiences that bring together content, language, and culture. I love that piece. Connect. I've had people that say, Jose, connect is kind of like building background. And my response is always kinda, because it takes it way, way deeper with an additive lens in terms of not transitioning kids to the English language. Is there any way that we could turn off the mic on the stage just to see if that's what's giving me feedback? Gracias, mi amigo, gracias. I'm gonna go ahead and also highlight the last one, which is commit. Commit in collaboration with students to creating a learning environment that is focused on continuous improvement and service to others. That's very, very different. That's what we were talking about yesterday for those of you. Me escuchan? For those of you that were with me yesterday in the testimonio session. So we're gonna get started though. Here's what I want you to do. You are now going to practice your writing. That's the language domain. That's the 4+1 language domain that you're gonna practice. You can do it on your phone or you can do it on a piece of paper, whatever works for you. But you are not practicing your chiriando. Your chiriando is cheating and chapuceando combined because it is gorgeous and it is a part of my linguistic repertoire. So you are going to practice your writing. I'm going to give you a content objective, and you are going to write a language objective that is student-friendly and that starts with I can. You can do it in English, or you can do it in Spanish or Mandarin, whatever language you facilitate instruction in. After you write that language objective, I will give you further instructions. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to repeat what you're going to be doing because this is an amazing strategy for emergent bilingual students. Mi amigo Sergio, what language domain is everyone going to be practicing?
For me, español.
Y van a practicar el hablar, el leer, el escribir, el hacer conexiones lingüísticas. ¿Cuál van a practicar?
Escribir.
Vamos a practicar el escribir. Yo les voy a dar una meta de aprendizaje del contenido y que va a ser el resto del grupo.
Gracias.
Gracias. Mira, el Sergio que así no quiere hablar conmigo. No te hagas, Sergio. Sergio.
Pues no manches, hombre.
No manches. I'm going to give you a content objective and you're going to write a language objective. ¿Estamos? This is a first grade standard. Your content objective is, I can identify geometric shapes. Your job is to write a student-friendly language objective that creates access to that standard. The content learning target is, I can identify geometric shapes. Write a language objective for that content learning target. My friends en la pared, sentados no se hagan, ándeles. Saquen el teléfono, saquen el papel, que soy maestro bravo. I was a B+, I told you. ¿Están practicando el escribir, no el hablar? The content learning target was, I can identify geometric shapes. You have to write a language objective for that content objective. Maquiyi, Nawi, Ye, Ome, Sente, Nechquita. Nechquita. Some Nahuatl for you. I practiced my Nahuatl yesterday in the Testimonio Critical Consciousness session. So really quickly, I want you to turn to someone at your table group in groups of 2s or 3s and share your language objectives. Are they similar? Are they different? What is going on? Rapidito. Share your content. Share your language objective. A ver, ¿qué hicieron? Donnez-moi 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Regardez-moi, s'il vous plaît. Regardez-moi, chaparrito over here, regardez-moi. Regardez-moi. So, as I walked and overheard some of the conversation in a couple of table groups, aquí estoy, miren, you're practicing your listening right now. Dije que están practicando el escuchar. La onda, los voy a poner en in-school suspension. So one of the things that I overheard, but that I always overhear as we're facilitating this type of professional development, is that many of us have a lot of different ways of really identifying how to write a language objective. And part of that reason is because we've been exposed and subjected to some really horrific and traumatic professional development about how to write freaking objectives. And so we hate them. And some of us don't use them specifically because we don't want to go there. And so our goal, as our team developed this framework, was to make it very crystal clear as to the components for our language objective writing specifically. Because most of us feel comfortable with content objectives, but not all of us feel super comfortable with language objectives. And so that's what we're going to tackle in the next couple of minutes. I'm going to ask one of my new friends to share a little bit of research from Moss and Brookhart. And the reason that we actually went with the work of Moss and Brookhart is because, unlike some research, they actually also focus on the impact of learning targets on children, not just the adults in the space. Mi amiga, would you help us out?
What am I doing? Sorry.
¿Vas a leer la primera?
The most effective teaching and the most meaningful learning happen when teachers design the right learning target for today's lesson and use it along with the students to aim for and access understanding.
Shut up! Su nombre? Claudia. Claudia's throwing a bombazo and she's saying that if you write the objectives for your principal and your assistant principal, you are the oppressor. I don't know if you heard that, but that's exactly what she was saying. She was saying that many of us actually write our objectives for the adults in the building rather than for the kids. And the moment that that happens is the moment that we become the oppressors, because kids have to own those objectives. Sígale, Claudia, más bombazos.
Learning targets and student-friendly description via words, pictures, actions, and/or accommodations of the three of what you intend students to learn or accomplish is a given lesson.
¿Y la última?
It is not a learning target unless both the teacher and the students aim for it during today's lesson.
That means that students are reviewing the content and the language objectives alongside you as co-constructors of the learning. I was in a classroom in Maryland, and they have what they call the language domain expert for the week. That's the 4+1. The 4+1 being listening, speaking, reading, writing, and metalinguistic awareness. And this primary student, I can't remember if it was kinder or first grade, gets up alongside the teacher, and the teacher reviews the content objectives for all of the centers that the students are going to be working at. And the student, 4+1 language domain expert, has the little pointer with a little finger. The fingers are color-coded. Their colors are orange for Spanish and blue for English. And the child actually reviews which 4+1 language domain each group is going to be focusing on. A first or a kindergartner actually takes ownership of which language domain. Now, sometimes teachers push back, ¿verdad? Porque somos peleoneros. And they'll say, Dr. Medina, but it's just that we practice all of the language domains at once. And I'm like, back down. I know that. But what one or two are you focusing on most at that moment? And so that the kids will continue to identify as we maneuver through the content which language objective they're working on. We wanted to make sure that we had kind of a scaffold for teachers. And so this visual, you need to take a picture of. I will also post this presentation along with the other. I won't sue you, so go ahead, ¿verdad? But in essence, the 4+1 language domain icon visuals, that's the entry into the language objective, into the language learning target. And so when a child is able to identify whether there's little lights by the 4+1 and they click the light as they move from objective to objective, that is kids saying, that's how I'm going to access the grade level standard. I know some of you, miren, some of you are looking at me and you're like, no me mire, doctor Memida, no me mire. Don't come into my classroom yet. First of all, if I came into your classroom, we would be learning together. But second of all, we know what we know when we know it. So it's not about por mi culpa, por mi culpa, por mi gran culpa. It is about when you know what you know, then we can modify the awesomeness that we're facilitating. The second step would be to create a simplified language learning target. And then finally, if we notice that our kids need something very specific in terms of manipulating the language, then we would go ahead and add an additional step to make it a more detailed language learning target. So let's start with a 4+1, and I'm just gonna give you some visuals. So this right here, this is a kinder classroom where the kids actually have the 4+1 language domain icons on popsicle sticks. And so when a teacher says, we're gonna do a turn and talk, it's not one of those fake turn and talks that the rest of us do. And you know what I'm talking about. An administrator walks into your classroom and you know that the kids should be talking, so what do? Turn around and talk to your partner, and then they don't say a damn thing because we have not actually created the systems so that the kids can manipulate the content and the language of the content. Remember that we know as teachers of emergent bilingual students that there are two things that need to happen at all times. One, kids need to practice the content via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic or cross-linguistic connections. And two, they need to do so with students that have different language proficiencies. By embedding the 4+1, then immediately that becomes a system for the entire school so that as the kids move from grade level to grade level, they know exactly what language domain they're working on. And they also know that if I want to learn about, I don't know, the new Frozen movie, then I need to be able to practice about the new Frozen movie via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic connections. This one here for my teachers, I was supposed to have a co-presenter from Beijing, but something happened in their personal life, so they send their apologies. But I wanted to make sure that for my Mandarin, English, dual language teachers, you had some examples. This here, they're practicing their reading, and they're actually manipulating objects, which is awesome. But look at this. Right next to the activity, the kids know which language domain they're actually practicing at that moment. These are the icons that Albuquerque Public School uses for the secondary level. For those of you that are middle school and high school teachers, if you tell kids you're gonna, clip on a little smiley face, they're going to kill you. And so you would do this in a different fashion for middle school and high school. For middle school and high school, it would look more as what I'm doing with you today. Like, this is what we're practicing. This is the one that we're manipulating. This final one over here is also a Mandarin example where the kids know exactly what they're practicing at that moment. For those of you that are not following me on social media, I hope that by now you've picked up your phone, and you have, because there are tons of examples from all over the world that show how to use the 4+1. I also created a video for teachers that school districts are using all over the country, because I'm telling you, if there's one thing that you could tweak that would change the way in which your classrooms feel and the way that your students breathe and learn, it would be to include a system where not only the entire school, but the entire district understood that this is how our students move through the content, by identifying the 4+1 language domains. So let's move now to the simplified language learning target. There are 3 steps to writing any language objective. And here are the steps. 1, choose an action verb having to do with a 4+1. 2, connected with a standard. And 3, add interaction. That interaction could be with a partner, with a teacher, with a graphic organizer. It could be with a Seesaw application where they're recording, creating a YouTube video. It could be their math or their science notebooks. So the 3 steps. 1, tienen que usar un verbo de acción conectado con el 4 y 1. 2, tienen que conectarlo con el estándar. Y 3, tienen que inculcar un tipo de interacción. Interacción con una pareja, interacción con el grupo, con la maestra, con un organizador gráfico, con una aplicación de tecnología, pero tiene que haber un tipo de interacción. So I'm going to give you one sample here, and you're going to take a look at the one that you created. So the content objective is I can identify geometric shapes. The language objective would be I can orally describe geometric shapes to a partner. What? But Jose, where's the belt with the little pointy things that hurts us, verdad? Nada. En español. Puedo describir oralmente figuras geométricas a un compañero. Let's see if it follows the rules. Elegí un verbo de acción conectado con el 4 y 1. Sí. We are going to be practicing speaking. Did I connect it with the standard? Yes, we're focusing on geometric shapes. And did I add an interaction? Yes, un compañero. 2 minutitos. What are you thinking? What are you feeling as you see that language objectives don't have to be difficult? The person that has the longest hair, you're going to get us started. I want you to practice your speaking. Let me go ahead and go back to my 4+1, mira. The person with the longest hair, you're practicing your speaking. The rest of the group is practicing their listening. Start us off. Mírame, mírame. Mírame, mírame. Start us off. The person with the longest hair, talk about what are you thinking, what are you feeling, now that you see a very simple, concrete way of writing your language objectives, and then the rest of the group can jump in. I want you to also talk about the 4+1 language domain icons. Do those exist in your school or district or not? And if not, ¿por qué fregados no? Because ¿por qué fregados is just as beautiful as ¿por qué fregados, verdad? 2 minutos, rapidito, rapidito. Oh, yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mírame, mírame. Mírame, mírame. So I came over here to hang out with my friends in the back, ¿verdad? Para que vean. Proximity, es que no estaban haciendo lo que tenían que hacer. I'm just messing, I'm kidding. So I heard a couple of comments. I'm actually going to use one of my friend's comments here. She was mentioning that giving kids ownership, especially with the language domains, really might change the way that a classroom feels. And I was sharing with this table group that kids will actually call the teacher out when you haven't practiced a specific language domain, and they will say, we haven't done metacognition or metalenguaje or translanguaging or cross-linguistic connections in 3 weeks. Like, they'll actually call you out on it. The other thing that happens is that the kids will call each other out on it. And they'll say things like, I'm supposed to be practicing speaking, ¿verdad? I was in California, and a dual language school that I've been serving there in Mount Diablo Unified School District, I was so happy because they came up with this on their own. But as the kids go up to speak about the content and the language, they'll say, yo hablo, and then all of the students say, nosotros escuchamos, which is amazing. And so I've stolen that and given them credit, because that is an amazing way to actually align with the 4+1 language domains. The other thing that I keep hearing as I walk through the table groups is that language objectives really have not been inculcated into our practice because of the fear of writing them. So I want to make sure that we leave this space really understanding that the content objective is the what the kids will learn. The language objective is the how they will reach that grade level standard via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic connections. The other piece that you need to remember is that if we feel very comfy with content objectives, but we're ignoring the language objectives, we are not doing right by kids. Because when we don't write language objectives that are specifically student-friendly and owned, then it's like asking kids to find a content learning target in the dark. In essence, the equity and social justice piece of the lesson planning process is the language objective. Because it doesn't matter if I don't bring a lot of linguistic pieces to my repertoire in English or Mandarin or Tagalog or French. I still have to be able to access the grade level standards, and we as educators are required to make sure that kids can access that grade level standard regardless of language proficiency. And so the moment that we don't write that language objective, we are in fact going against social justice. Unos de ustedes se quedaron con la lengua pa' fuera. But what about our secondary friends? Do I have secundaria? So I'm like one of those weird educators. I've served as an educator and administrator at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels. I wanted to make sure that all of us understood that even at the middle school and high school level, our kids deserve language objectives that create access to that grade level standard. So I chose one here for my secondary friends. It follows the same 3 steps. I can write an essay using transition words via the provided script. So let's see if it follows. Write is the 4+1 that they're going to be focusing on. The content, the standard, is using transition words. And then via the provided linguistic frames or script, that's what a script is, that's the interaction. Let's say that I wanted to make it more robust, because remember that this is the simplified version. These are the 4 ways that I could add to that simplified language learning target to take it to that next level. So the first way is academic vocabulary, language skills and functions, language structures or grammar, and language learning strategies. And I'd love to give credit to our colleague and awesome researcher, Echevarria, and her team, because these 4 ways really give shape to the work that we're doing in terms of specifically serving emergent bilingual students in the dual language classroom. So I'm going to go back to this one. Let's say that I wanted to go ahead and have kids manipulate some very specific transition words. Then all I would do is add a step 4. I can write an essay using transition words via the provided script, using the phrases in addition to, because of, finally. for example. And so you would just add the step 4. Now, I don't have time to do the whole lesson planning process with you right now, but I did do on social media 2 minutes of the 4+1, 2 minutes of the simplified language learning targets, and 2 minutes, very, very quick, on the detailed language learning targets. So please go back to the Instagram account, go back to Twitter, and feel free to use those. Or you can also invite me or a member of our team to come. This is our favorite PD because we actually spent 2 days where teachers are planning for a lesson that they're going to be facilitating the following week. And so we go through the research, but we make sure that you feel very comfortable with every single piece of lesson planning for the emergent bilingual student in the dual language classroom. Here's another one for that example that we started the session with. I can orally describe geometric shapes to a partner using triangle and angle, or using vertices and angles. Whatever academic vocabulary you want the kids to manipulate, then you would just add the step 4. ¿Estamos? Some of you are like, ay, esto está bien fácil, finalmente se me está clarificando el mundo, alabaré al Señor, ¿verdad? Así se me están poniendo muy contentos. So now, because we're in a rush, ¿verdad? I want to share as much as possible. Now, you're going to practice your writing objective. And what you're going to do is you're going to now write a culture objective to the content and the language objective that you've already written. So the content objective was, I can identify geometric shapes. You've written a language objective that is student-friendly. I now want you to write a culture learning target. And I'm not going to go over the slides, but I've given you some support. And remember, you're adults and certified teachers, so you make it up if you don't know how to write a culture learning target. ¿Estamos? Un minuto. You're practicing your writing. Write a culture learning target. Adelante. You're not practicing your chapuceando, you're chiriando. Silencio. 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 Hijo de Madriuk, silencio. Te miro, ¿sabes? You're writing a culture learning target for your content and your language objectives. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Go ahead and share with the partner or partners that you were sharing. What did you come up with in terms of a culture learning target? Adelante, rapidito, rapidito. ¿Todo bien? Maquiyi, nawi, ye, ome, sente, nechkita. Say nechkita with me. Nechkita. One more time. Nechkita. This evening, when you are with your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your boyfriend and girlfriend, no judgment, ¿verdad? You can say, nechkita, nechkita, nechkita. That means look at me, ¿verdad? So definitely as I walked around, I know that this one is probably the one that's causing a lot of conversation. So if the content objective is the what the kids are going to be learning, and the language objective is how the students will be able to access that grade level standard via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic connections, then the culture learning target is the why the students are learning what they're learning. It really contextualizes the content and the language integration. And I was very, very guilty. A veces cuando los estudiantes me decían, Señor Medina, chaparrito tan guapo, ¿por qué estamos aprendiendo esto? I would say, pues porque te lo dije, compa. Because I told you. That's why we're learning it. Or some of us will say, because you'll need it next grade level. Rather than actually contextualizing the learning. In dual language, we have to tackle that third goal, that sociocultural competence, equity and social justice, dismantling systems of oppression, causando desmadre in the name of equity and social justice. Like that is what that third goal is about. And this is how we get there. The culture learning target is the vehicle that ensures that we're not just focusing on bilingualism and biliteracy and grade level academic achievement, the first two goals, because those are the ones that are comfy. Those are the ones that feel normal and safe for us. But this is what actually makes our kids better people than we are. Because we're a freaking desmadre ourselves, and our job is to make sure that our kids are better off than we are in terms of being kind and empathetic. Think about it. What good is it if our kids are bilingual and biliterate and have that grade level academic achievement if they're not kind people and don't understand that their job in life is to create access to privilege for others? That is what is important. And so if you don't focus on the culture learning target, again, you are the oppressor, ¿verdad? ¿Dónde está mi amiga la oppressor? Mira, I'm making event famous. She was in a training with me, and I asked them to make a name tent, and this is what she wrote. The oppressor, ¿verdad? The oppressor. So yeah, es famosa en las redes sociales, la oppressor. Yvette is an amazing teacher who creates educational access. She's just very sassy como yo, and I love that. I love that. So let's take a look at what makes up a cultural learning target. My friend Carlos is going to help us out. Listo, Carlos.
Align with the sociocultural competence goal as delineated in the guiding principles for dual language education, third edition.
O sea que the guiding principles tells us, ¿verdad, that we need to tackle this. What else, Carlos?
Encourage students to value their native languages and cultures.
This is really important. I want you to know that even in the dual language space, we're sometimes big haters. Big haters. I've actually had somebody, a colleague of mine who I respect a lot, tell me, Jose, please be careful in mixing your Inglés and your Español. Because remember that our job in dual language is to make sure that we get kids to academic language. And I was like, actually, that's not it at all. Porque cuando nuestros estudiantes sienten el valor del idioma que traen, entonces eso es más importante. That's more important. We're not adding academic language at the expense of whatever language the students bring from the home. Why is it that so many of us actually say, Dr. Medina, it's just that you don't understand. The kids that I serve, they don't speak either language. And I'm like, really? Not a word? It's all horrific, you want to spit on it? Because we don't realize that we're being subtractive as we're putting value on what the students bring into the space. Estás echando unos bombazos, mira, están bien incómodos, síguele.
Promote the importance of seeing similarities and differences in others, but highlight the differences as opportunities to connect rather than obstacles to overcome.
Which is the definition of sociocultural competence. That is what we should be teaching kids, that we see each other, we see the similarities, the differences, but we see the differences as ways to connect, not as ways to hate one another. They're a way to make connections with one another.
Build metalinguistic awareness and allow students the freedom to make cross-linguistic connections.
You're not gonna believe it, Carlos, but there are some people at La Cosecha, some perhaps even in this room, that refuse to say the word translanguaging. I'm trying to figure out who. ¿Le tienen miedo a la palabra el translenguaje? Because there are some of us that still have this warped ideology that is aligned with old research that tells us that we separate the languages to the point of never bringing them together. One of my really good friends is la doctora Susana Ibarra Johnson, who is one of the co-authors of the Translanguaging Classroom. And as one of the co-authors of the Guiding Principles, people sometimes try to put us against each other, because in the Guiding Principles, we say you model each of the two languages so that students are able to mobilize English and mobilize Spanish, or whatever the two program languages are. But in the Guiding Principles, it doesn't say that you do so by getting rid of everything that students bring in their linguistic repertoire. And so translanguaging and the Guiding Principles are best friends, not enemies. And so our kids need to be able to make those connections. Y la última, compa.
Add both social and academic language to students' linguistic repertoire.
That is huge. Gracias, Carlos. Se lo agradezco. That is huge. There are some of you that are so entrenched in the idea that your job is to get kids to pass a standardized test that you have completely forgot the reason why we got into this job in the first place. Remember that dual language is about shaking a system up. And so that includes valuing everything that the students bring. The coger from Puerto Rico is as beautiful as the tomar o agarrar de México y otras partes de Latinoamérica. The sup is just as gorgeous as the how do you do. The asks that some of our African American Black friends use is just as beautiful as asks. But we have been so focused on destroying and bringing down the value of what kids bring into this space that we've continued that cycle of oppression. So here are some examples of culture learning targets so that you can get an idea. Oops, here we go. Language arts. Content, I can identify the theme in the story. The culture learning target, I can make connections between the story's theme and my own personal life experience. Why would that be the why? Because all of a sudden, whatever I bring into the space is going to be of value. I was in a dual language classroom, and I walked in, and they had worked on regionalismos. They had an anchor chart, and it said something in the middle in English like, "That's awesome." And the kids had to figure out different ways that we say "that's awesome" in different parts of Latinoamérica. And all of a sudden, I read, "Qué chido." And I have to tell you, as a 48-year-old that really now is looking 28, no se rían. To see que chido on an anchor chart almost brought me to tears, because my entire life I was told that I was less than because I was an English language learner, because I was a limited English proficient, because I wasn't good enough, because my lenguaje from El Paso, Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua wasn't good enough. And by seeing que chido on a freaking anchor chart, it showed me that I was. And imagine what it did for the kids that co-created that anchor chart. Qué chido, qué padre, te botaste, te aventaste, as part of the space that was being taken up in that classroom. That is amazing, bringing the student's life into it. Here's the math one that we were tackling. I can use cognates for geometric shapes to make connections between the two languages. So here we're really focusing through the cultural learning target on bringing that metalinguistic, that +1 to life so that the kids are actually making those connections. Here is a science, I believe, 4th grade standard. I can analyze the outcome of a scientific hypothesis, the culture learning target. I can create a short YouTube video or a seesaw video explaining the experiment outcomes and how they impact everyday life. So a culture learning target can be about Indigenous Americans or Asian culture, but it also could be just about real world connections. And so for those of us that are thinking, well, what if I can't make it work? What if I can't add something that's cultural? By simply bringing in that real world connection, you are embedding that culture learning target. This is a middle school one. I can analyze events that led to the Holocaust in Europe prior to World War II. Take a look at the culture. I can make connections between the cultural destructiveness that led to the Holocaust and present day injustices targeting immigrant communities. Ooh. You know that right outside my hometown of El Paso, Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, there are still kids that are separated from their families. I wonder when the last time that all of us donated to Raíces so that we could continue that battle. No? ¿No han donado a Raíces? You should go donate to Raíces. Maybe that would be your action item después de esta sesión, ¿verdad? Just saying. Bombazo. Here's a PE one. And guess what? Once you have one dual language classroom in your building, you're a dual language school. You're welcome. When you have one dual language classroom in your district, you're a freaking dual language district. Amárrense. And so that means that every single person is creating access to grade level standards via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic connections. So here's a PE cultural one. I can compare and contrast various on the market diet programs based on that content objective. And you know, I've been working on this one. I have personal experience with this one porque subí mucho peso el año pasado, así es que mire, le he estado echando ganas, ¿verdad? And then finally, a music one. I can listen to music from different parts of Asia and identify how vocal range can influence the way I feel when listening to a song. This is a high school music example, just showing that the C6 by Literacy framework and really lesson planning through that multicultural lens is about everyone in the building. As a side note, I've been very, very sad since August the 3rd with what happened in El Paso. Like, it has changed my testimonio forever. Like, I will never, just like many of us, will never be the same again. And it's so crazy because when I was little, my mom and my dad used to play music, and I'd be like, pónganle en inglés, ponga en inglés. But the only thing that is helping to heal my sadness is Mexican music. Lately, I'm connecting to that cultural learning target. Estoy escuchando los Bukis. I mean, los Bukis. Jose. I don't know if you saw this, but I was feeling really sad, and I decided to do a lip sync for your life on social media where I lip sync to ¿cómo se llama? El Triste de Jose. Some of you are like, what does that mean? It means I was lip syncing, because you can be a researcher, a practitioner, and a rockin' kick-ass lip syncer as well. So not only do you get research, but you also get some entertainment, ¿verdad? Lola Beltrán. I mean, that's really helped me as I try to make sense of what is happening. La Celia Cruz, claro, no tiene que ser mexicana, desde Latinoamérica, ¿verdad? También he estado escuchando mucho tejano. Obviamente la Selena es más nueva, pero la Selena sí una vez, siempre, por siempre, ¿verdad? Por siempre. Un minuto. I can't believe this, but you're almost going to abandon me. I have like 20 minutes with you, and I want to make sure that I talk about translanguaging and connect. So, 2 minutitos. What are you thinking about the cultural learning target? And I'm going to come and eavesdrop, and I'm going to hang out in the middle because I've not hung out in the middle yet. Adelante, 2 minutitos. Cultural learning targets. ¿Qué onda? Anybody can start because you're adults. Rápido. And one. Ah, mira, it helps if I turn it on, ¿verdad? I'm going to ask one or two of my friends. Mírame. I want to make sure that I get to this last piece because I want to show you some examples of some of the work from around the country. Mírame, aquí estoy chaparrito. For my monolingual, fabulous monolingual dual language educators, because remember that you don't have to be bilingual and biliterate and Latino to be in an English dual language program. You just need to believe the research and have a good heart. So for my monolingual friends in the room who are fabulous, chaparrito means short, handsome, sassy, hot. ¿Verdad? Man. You can quote me. Go ahead, quote me. Lo quiero ver en Instagram, ¿verdad? Lo quiero ver en Instagram. Really quickly, I'm going to ask my friend Angela, who I'm so happy because La Cosecha actually put the orthographic accents on our names. O tú se lo pusiste. Ándale, se les olvidó de la A. Angela, what did your team or what did your table group talk about in terms of the cultural learning target?
Una de nuestras colegas estaba comentando de que los objetivos culturales se refieren a hacer esas conexiones con las experiencias, las historias de los estudiantes.
Absolutely. It's about really leveraging the students' experiences, their testimonio in essence, and bringing it into the space so that we can make those connections. Let me ask one more friend. Actually, let's see. Acá no, ya me dijo que la mera neta, ¿verdad? A ver, mi amiga, usted sí sabe. ¿Qué onda? What did you all talk about?
Hablamos sobre que cuando tienes los objetivos culturales le creas acceso a los niños y ellos aprenden a aceptarse como son y lo que son y nomás es seguir agregando a su repertorio lingüístico.
Absolutely. Están agregando. They're continuing to add to not only their linguistic but their cultural repertoire. There is some work, and I don't know if my friend Dr. Igone Arteagoitia remembers, but there is some work that shows that students who are in a dual language two-way program where they're getting a chance to culturally and linguistically interact are more, it's more possible that they're actually going to reach the 3 goals of dual language than if you have an immersion program where you don't perhaps have different students that are a part of that group. And so in those instances, you might reach goals number 1 and number 2, but it becomes much more difficult to actually work on your sociocultural competence when you don't have others that don't look and feel and are different than you so that you can have those experiences. Perfecto. So we're gonna wrap up the last 18 minutes, and I wanna talk to you about the second C. Just as a recap, the first C is about creating learning experiences that bring together content, language, and culture. Content is the what, the standard that the students are trying to access. Language is the how they will reach that standard via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and making metalinguistic awareness. And then the cultural learning target is the why. It contextualizes the learning. It also allows our students from wherever they come to feel important and included in the learning experience. And so those are the 3 pieces that really align with that first C, create. I love the connect. And I love it because I think that it's turning the dual language world on its ass. Let me say that again. I love it because I think that it's turning the dual language world on its ass. The reason that I'm stressing ass is because I know that some of you want this polished, Dr. Jose Luis Medina Hernandez, Franco Lopez Jr. Diaz Cruz, and that's a part of me. But the part from El Barrio is also a part of me. And the ass is just as beautiful as any academic word because it conveys the message that I want to share at that moment. And some of you are feeling really uncomfortable. You're welcome. Connect. Learning experiences to students' lives and linguistic repertoires. That's very different than building background. That is actually saying that my dad with a limited education would come into your school and would be seen as someone of value. That my dad wouldn't show up to your school as a 4th or a 5th grader and that you would be like, oh my God, we just got another newcomer. We need to have an LPAC meeting. I wonder if he's gonna pass the standardized test. Where's the ESOL teacher to fix this child? Which is happening in every single one of our schools. it probably may be one of us in this room. And so what Connect says is that we catch ourselves in our bias and our prejudice, and we don't think in that way. I was sharing with a group that my dad used to sell limones and naranjas and chiclets on the bridge from El Paso to Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, when he was 8, 9, 10 years old. And if he showed up, we would have thought that he didn't know anything. But he did. You all know what chiclets are, right? The 4 pieces of gum. And so my dad would sell those chiclets, and he was able to get you to buy the chiclet even though you knew that after 3 chews, the flavor would be gone. And he changed the peso to the dollar and the dollar to the peso on a global fluctuating market. He was phenomenal. You just didn't want to see it. And what does that say about us? When we would immediately code him as limited English proficient and begin the intervention process, even though he was a math genius. And so that's what Connect is about. Activating and valuing student schema, social and academic language as part of one linguistic repertoire, and then finally, those cross-linguistic connections that so many of us have been so afraid to embrace. So I'm gonna move through this quickly, but I wanted to remind us of some of the seminal work that is absolutely important. I love the work of Jim Cummins because it really shared with us that what we know in one language, we know in every language. If I know the water cycle, I know the water cycle in German. I know the water cycle in French. I would just need someone to help me language about that so that I can mobilize the linguistic pieces within my one linguistic repertoire and produce about the water cycle in an additional language. That's very, very important. But we also know that we can add to this seminal work. And here comes that feared word of translanguaging. I want you to know that even as I continue to grow in this area, I have depended on the shoulders and stood on the shoulders of our researchers that have really guided this work, like Ofelia Garcia and like Susana Ibarra-Johnson, who I have to tell you, Dr. Ibarra-Johnson has been just such an angel because she's really given so much input on the C6 biliteracy framework and specifically the Connect section. Oops, translanguaging. I'm gonna stand up here because I want everybody to see me. So when I was talking to my friend Susana, I said, Susana, give me in one sentence something that I could share with teachers as we're lesson planning for the dual language classroom. And so this is the sentence that she gave me in terms of the essence of translanguaging. Translanguaging is the mobilization of specific language features within one linguistic repertoire based on the context and need for communication. I want you to practice your reading at this moment. If I had an icon, boom, I would clip it, ¿verdad? Practice your reading and internalize that definition. So I'm kind of telenovela-ish, and so I always need a little TPR. So there are 3 pieces to the advice and the support that Dr. Ibarra-Johnson gave me. First, translanguaging is the mobilization of linguistic features within one linguistic repertoire based on the context and need for communication. 3 parts: mobilization of linguistic features within one linguistic repertoire based on the context and need for communication. And so I wanted to model for you what that might look like. If I'm going to be translanguaging in academic English, then I would be able to do so within my one linguistic repertoire, because I now know that that means that I'm going to mobilize the features that I need at that moment. Watch this. I'm so excited that the folks at La Cosecha allowed me to share some of the latest research and instructional recommendations in terms of how to support our emergent bilingual students in dual language contexts in the United States. En español, I'm now going to be translanguaging en español. Estoy tan contento que mis amigos de la Cosecha me dieron la oportunidad de compartir la más reciente investigación en cuanto a dar apoyo a nuestros estudiantes bilingües emergentes en los programas duales en un contexto de los Estados Unidos. That is translanguaging, but wait, for all of those haters that say that when our kids intertwine pieces from their linguistic repertoires that's a deficit, that's not a deficit. That's that we're super fabulous. I'm so excited que mis amigos de la Cosecha were able to dejarme compartir some of the most recent investigaciones en un contexto dual for dual language programs. And if I wanted to bring it and be translanguaging in social English, I could do that. My brother Gilberto, when my nieces were going into school, he was pondering along with his wife dual language programming. And so I could mobilize social language from my one linguistic repertoire. Check this out. No longer academic, now social English. Gilbert, ya te dije que no te voy a decir Gilbert porque te llamas Gilberto, but I really want you to consider putting Alisa in a dual language program. No, I know what you're thinking, but shut up. Social. That is what we want to teach our kids. In a moment, I'm going to show you an anchor chart. But when I go to some of your schools, because I know some of you, and I say to a 5-year-old, what's translanguaging? And this is what the students say. That's when you have your English hand and you have your Spanish hand and you connect it with a bridge and you put the bridge in your head because what you know in English, you know in Spanish, and what you know in Spanish, you know in English. ¿Qué? ¿Qué es el translenguaje? Es cuando tienes la mano de inglés, tienes la mano de español, lo conectas con el puente, te pones el puente en la cabeza porque lo que sabes en inglés lo sabes en español y lo que sabes en español lo sabes en inglés. Shut up! What is a content objective? Es lo que estamos aprendiendo, está ahí. What's a language objective? Es cómo lo vamos a alcanzar con escuchar, hablar, leer, platicar y hacer conexiones de translenguaje. ¿Qué es un cognado? Son palabras en inglés y en español que son casi igualitas y tienen el mismo significado. What are the 3 goals of dual language? Didn't you see them at the entrance, Dr. Medina? And that is why the C6 really helps us to bring all of those pieces together. Translanguaging moves additive bilingualism to a deeper understanding of how we function. As emergent bilinguals, we want to speak and access different parts of our linguistic repertoire. The corriente or current represents the fluid nature of this phenomenon. And I really want to give credit again to Dr. Ofelia Garcia because it is her work that really has guided this field. And it's time for all of us to embrace her work because it is the reality. We no longer have time to continue to align with older research. It was one of her students that said, Spanish runs in my heart, but English rules my veins. And that's because we continue to serve kids through a monolingual lens. I wanted to show a video. Ooh, I have 7 minutes. Ahí vamos. I want to show you a quick video of, it's 2 minutes. It's a student it's a child that is 2 years old. And the people that are asking her questions are asking questions in both languages. I want you to notice how she's translanguaging, and then I'll give you a chance to chat. ¿Listos? You're practicing your listening.
¿Cuál es tu color favorito?
Pink.
¿Cuál es tu película favorita? Let it go. ¿Sí? Taylor, can you sit down?
No.
Come on, sit down. ¿Qué te gusta comer?
Bitcoin.
Pollo, hamburguesas.
Pollo.
Pollo.
Chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets?
Yeah.
With ranch?
Yeah.
What is this? What is this?
Me?
Green?
Yeah.
Can you open it?
Yeah.
Okay. What's there?
A monkey.
What is the monkey doing? ¿Qué está comiendo?
Banana.
¿Qué es esto?
Treasure.
Treasure, ok. ¿Lo abres?
Sí.
¿Qué hay ahí?
Green.
Green? Ok, ¿qué hay abajo de esto? ¿Quieres mirar?
Sí.
Oh my god, ¿qué es?
A tortoise.
¿De qué color es la tortuga?
Turtles.
¿De qué color es?
Es turtles.
Turtle.
Yeah, turtles.
¿De qué color es? What color is this turtle?
Green.
Green. What's there?
Puppy.
A puppy! Yay!
Puppy.
Is he happy? The dog?
Yeah, the bears. They have bears.
Okay. What is he doing?
Yeah, it's a puppy. That's a different puppy.
That's a different puppy?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the mother.
Yeah, the bears.
So she's the mom. It's not a he, it's a she.
It's the mama.
That's a mama. Yay. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
So before I actually give you a time to think, I want to reference something that Dr. Ofelia Garcia said in one of her interviews. She said that when students that are monolingual English speaking walk into a US school, they are able to access almost 100% of their linguistic repertoires because we want kids to be English dominant. That is the standard. And when a multilingual student walks into our schools, that is seen as something that is less than or that puts them at risk. And so think about Taylor. Taylor is doing this at the age of 2. And there are some of us in this room that can't do that at the age of not 2. But yet, she is the one that is going to be coded as limited English proficient when she should be coded as super fabulous multilingual a causar un desmadre. But that is not the way that we code her. Dr. Garcia also says that it's like a monolingual kid comes in, English speaking, into school, and it's like he or she or they are playing the drums with both hands. But then Taylor comes in, and because she's multilingual, we tie one hand behind her back, and we ask her to play the drums, and she's playing the freaking drums, and she's not making the same sound because we're only allowing her to access less than 50% of her linguistic repertoire. And even worse, we're assessing her in less than 50% of her linguistic repertoire. This is what I say. I say that dual language, when done through an equity and social justice lens, it allows us to untie that second hand and say to Taylor, tócale, ándale, órale, so that Taylor actually has the opportunity to leverage everything that she brings into the space. And that is what Dr. Ofelia Garcia and her team have done for our field. So un aplauso para ella porque, mira, yo así. And I'm so grateful to them that they allowed me to continue to add to that work. I wanted to share from my Mandarin teachers, but you could do this in Spanish. They actually created this with 4-year-olds. This is an anchor chart that explains translanguaging with 4-year-olds. The last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run through examples because I want you to have examples. Side-by-side color-coded anchors. I love the work of Beeman and Euro. I continue to add to their work. They are awesome. But we could also do things beyond just the bridge level 1 and level 2. This one right here I love because this is a monolingual teacher that is actually doing cross-linguistic connections in the monolingual setting. Some side-by-side, I love this one on punctuation between Chinese and English, but could be done in Spanish and English. Some additional side-by-side, and this will be in the PowerPoint that you will have access to. Some secondary examples. More secondary examples. Secundaria. I love this. The kids in kinder were actually comparing the symbols in Chinese to the alphabet in English, and then you see some of the cross-linguistic work there. And then I wanted to talk about centers. If you don't have a +1 center, why don't you? If I'm facilitating instruction in English, then all of my centers would be in English, but one center could bring the two languages together. If I'm facilitating math centers, in Spanish, all of my instruction would be in Spanish, but one center could actually bring the two languages together the way in which this was done. Or here's another one. That's a center, that's the translanguaging center, the +1 center. Here's another one. The kids had to, in math, find the word 12, and then the one that said 1, 10, and 2 ones. I couldn't find the one with 2 ones, but I pulled one there, and then they would stick it on the little Velcro piece. Un minuto. What is your big takeaway, and what is your one action item? And I hope that I get to come and hang out with you, or that my team gets to come and hang out and lesson plan with you. One action item, rapidito. You're practicing, you're speaking. Talk to your table groups. We have about 2 minutes. What is one action item that you want to implement before I say goodbye? Rapidito. Cinco. That was not a minute, I know. Cuatro. I just realized that I already went over. 3, 2, 1. Mírame, mírame. Mírame, mírame. Mírame, mírame. I apologize. I thought I had a minute, but you need to get to your next session. The last thing I want to say to you is thank you. Mírame, mírame. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing. Know that you're in the right space and you're exactly the person that your kids need to continue this work. Acuérdense que a causar desmadre en el nombre de equidad y justicia social. Aplauso y, and if you see me, don't act like you don't know me, eh? Don't act like you don't know me.
How will we go?